Hello, I'm Roy Richardson, and this is the Dynamic Business Leaders Podcast. Welcome to another edition of the Dynamic Business Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Roy Richardson, joined by my insightful co-host, Sean Murphy. This episode is brought to you by Aurora Infotech, helping organizations turn cybersecurity, compliance, and resilience into a competitive advantage. Folks, our guest today is a force in two different arenas. She founded and scaled Avant Healthcare Professionals into one of the largest international healthcare staffing companies in the US. And then, because building once wasn't enough, she co-founded Kismet Technologies, where she's now CEO, developing a first-of-its-kind mineral-based antimicrobial poised to change how we think about safer, more sustainable services. She's raised $58 million across venture capital, private equity, and strategic investors, served on boards including Nemours Children's Health in Florida, and she's been recognized as EY Entrepreneur of the Year and Orlando Business Journal CEO of the Year, among other honors. From leading global staffing to navigating deep tech and even stepping up when a technical founder exited, there's a hard-won wisdom in this one, folks. Shari Costantini, welcome to the Dynamic Business Leaders Podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with Rory and Sean today, and appreciate the opportunity to share my story.
Awesome. Well, we're thrilled to have you here, and let's roll it off. Let's start by getting to know you beyond the bio, and then we'll dive into Kismet Technologies, and we'll cover the journey, right? So we're going to start with something light. When you're not building Kismet, what does a perfect off day look like for Shari?
Well, my husband and I enjoy fishing. And so we just built a second home in the Low Country in South Carolina. So you might find us fishing for redfish or trout there. And that is a perfect relaxing day for me. Nice.
And, building and going through and building the companies that you've built and putting, the leadership and the thought processes, et cetera. What's one habit that meaningfully boosts your energy during busy stretches? I mean, everybody has that one thing they tune into. What is yours?
Mine is working out. So I am just dedicated to working out. I don't know what life would be like without that. So whether I'm starting at 4:45 in the morning or ending the day with, an evening ruck with my husband in our neighborhood, it's really important to me to spend some time each and every day, exercising. And really, that's kind of my stress relief. That's my source of energy and something I'm really committed to.
Awesome. And that gets the blood and everything else flowing, right? So during your journey, and I would say, what's a leadership lesson you've learned outside of work?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question, and one that I brought to life within Avant. But really knowing ourselves in terms of, what makes us tick also helps us understand how other people tick. So one thing I learned from, whether I call it a therapist or a life coach, is that other people's behaviors and reactions are more about them than they are about us. And if you can integrate that into your life, your professional life, your personal life, it's very freeing.
That's so true, and I would say very deep, definitely. I want to rewind the clock a little bit here and go back into how this all started, your journey into healthcare, and that ultimately led you to found Avant Healthcare Professionals in 2003. Tell us a little bit about that spark and what led you to believe the model could scale nationally.
Yeah, so I went into clinical nursing with the thought that that would be kind of a technical aspect to me getting my MBA and developing a career in business. So that was kind of my entrance into not just healthcare as a clinician, but healthcare as a business. And I worked in home health, I worked in hospice, and there were certainly clinician shortages that we dealt with. And so I had the opportunity to lead some home health agencies where we used international physical occupational therapists as well as nurses. And that's when I first was introduced to international staffing. And I just really grew to love it. And I think one of the reasons I loved it so much is that it was really an opportunity to make an impact on people's lives at a level I had never had the opportunity to do before. And so, for me, I was always looking at it from a clinical lens. And so I thought, as I learned the business, that if we could better prepare these clinicians from overseas to acclimate to the US, and then better prepare the hospitals to clinically receive them, I felt like that could be a real differentiator. And ultimately, when I exited the industry 25 years later, it still was a real differentiator. So that was really amazing to me that we continued to have that differentiation.
I know that Avant has grown to be one of the largest healthcare staffing companies in the U.S., if not at a larger scale. And it's something that you had a vision and a dream and made a reality. And, you've also held leadership roles across boards and associations. How did those experiences shape your leadership lens for, what you're doing today?
I would say that the number one thing, participation on community boards, trade associations, taught me was how to build consensus. And, you've got people from different backgrounds with, different reasons for being in the room. The trade association was particularly interesting because we were friendly competitors and had a number of state, federal, and foreign government regulations that we had to sort through together. So I would say that the number one thing was really that consensus building.
Awesome. Yeah, that's very important, and particularly in a field where you have competitors. But looking back at Avant's formative years, what patterns and culture, process, or customer demand convince you that this could become a category leader?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I really think it was the focus on the clinical aspects of the transition for the nurses and for the customers. Beyond that, we also had a number of cultural transition issues that we had to address. So we did both of those, and we were very good at that, and we really perfected it. And by involving the customer, the hospital staff at that level, the relationships that we were able to build and the loyalty in our program was really tremendous. And so I saw that you'd have changes within a customer, and maybe they'd move away from you for a little bit, maybe to save some money on your bill rates or something like that. But we consistently got those people back. And as a nurse, working with primarily nurses in the hospital, I also kept a close relationship with those leaders so that they felt like they knew what was going on within the organization.
That's an impressive strategy that you've had to employ to sort of keep all the parts together there. And certainly, realizing certain things in culture and adapting processes, et cetera. Very, very impressive. But I want to transition a little bit into the heart of it, the model, the mission, and the work of Kismet Technologies, which is where you're at today. So break it down for us, what does your mineral-based antimicrobial do, And how is it different from other additives?
So we are the first of our kind in terms of a mineral-based antimicrobial. And what is so unique about this technology is that when it comes in contact with bacteria, viruses, fungus, it creates a reaction that produces hydrogen peroxide from the relative humidity in the air, in its simplest terms. And so it continues to produce that until that pathogen is eradicated. And what's really unique is that it's regenerative. So it doesn't lose that ability to continue to have that reaction as long as it's present. So we put it in a variety of substrates, and it continues to have that reaction. I think the other really interesting part about this is that we have seen an evolution in the material-based or mineral-based antimicrobials over time. And that's allowed us to have new applications like for food packaging. Food in this country alone, 40% of food is not consumed because of spoilage. And it is a $210 billion issue in this country. On a global level, it's a $1 trillion issue. So, seeing the evolution of these material technologies that mitigate harmful microbes, they provide the ability for us to have a higher quality of life, a safer environment, and stay healthier at the end of the day.
Wow. So, in other words, you have a technology that basically keeps surfaces cleaner for longer by using advanced natural mineral, I'm assuming nanotechnology, that activates when germs are present.
Which is really amazing. I mean, you look at something that all of us have heard about is the boar's head recall. And it was listeria, a pathogen that lives in the cooler temperatures. Those things are always wrapped in cling wrap. One of the things that we have developed with a partner is proof of concept on putting our technology in that cling wrap, that PE film, or in PET containers where ready-to-eat foods come in to keep them fresher longer.
Nice. Yeah, I can tell you. I mean, my wife and I, we have many a times where we'll go and we'll buy, sometimes just fresh produce, and astonished at how fast it perishes, right? And usually on Friday nights we go to the open market and Apopka, and there's an organization there. They actually produce fresh lettuce. And we purchase from them because they're local farmers, and that lasts 2 weeks, maybe 3. But yeah, it's a lot of it is with packaging and the bacteria that gets captured in the packaging process, right? So your technology would actually enable that produce, et cetera, to last longer.
And some of that food, that produce that you get, you would be astonished at how long ago it was actually picked and shipped and stored and then put out on the grocer cases and things like that. So that's the goal, is to keep it fresher longer and to mitigate those microbes that deteriorate it and spoil food.
And so, not to put you on the spot with this, because I know you're not the regulator, but you would think that, with all these outbreaks that we've been hearing, because it just seems like every couple of weeks we see, a recall of this, a recall of that, and, some type of medical related issue as a result of it. What are you seeing with what you're doing in terms of, regulatory shifts that, is affecting your strategy to come to market with this remarkable product?
Yeah, I think that one of the trends we see, whether it's in the US or the EU, and other countries typically follow, the US is a very large country, the EU has many countries in it as well, is we follow their trends in the EU. Usually the US, maybe we lead on some, but primarily we follow the EU. And what we have seen is that they want to either restrict the level of certain antimicrobials or ban them altogether. And what that means is that you have fewer and fewer choices. One thing that is a real challenge is antimicrobial resistance. And you may have heard of this. We hear about it more in healthcare. Like you get, methicillin resistant Staph aureus. Okay, so it's resistant to a lot of antibiotics. It's resistant to a lot of cleaners. You get all different kinds of pathogens that, as we see food processing facilities, healthcare facilities use stronger and stronger chemicals necessary to keep those pathogens at bay. So I think there's a real dilemma to find antimicrobials that work without really overusing them, and that overuse can sometimes be toxic.
Yeah, I mean you're absolutely right in a sense, and perfect analogy. I mean, if you think of it, right, with penicillin or anything else, for example, the medication that's applied to an issue, they'll tell you don't overtake it because if not, your body becomes accustomed to it, right? I guess it's the same here, and what you're saying is that they've been really using stronger chemicals to fight these what you call it, which isn't good anyhow, right? So let me ask you, where today is Kismet on its journey, and in terms of milestones, early pilots, and what signals tell you that their product is actually fit for market?
Well, when I came to Kismet Technologies and joined as the co-founder, the company was creating some of its own products. And we did a lot of pilot testing in the real world. You can run tests in the lab and you can show efficacy against different pathogens. But really, at the end of the day, it's how does this act in real world environments that have a lot of bioburden, a lot of dirt, a lot of soil, that type of thing. So we ran a lot of pilots that really told us how the technology would react in hospitals, in animal facilities, in clean rooms, in agriculture facilities, and it performed very well, providing residual protection. So when you think about surfaces, you think, and this was the challenge in COVID, is that we could clean surfaces and they were clean at that moment in time. But when somebody touched them and deposited the virus on them, then it was no longer clean or sanitized. And so having a technology like ours that can be put in products that have longer lasting residual protection on surfaces is a real game changer. So, you asked how we're doing. We have about 26 companies in our joint product development pipeline. We moved away from making our own products. We realized we're good at making our technology, manufacturing that. We've scaled that manufacturing, but we want to work with people that know how to formulate disinfectants or make coatings. And so we've launched 2 products. One that is launching now is a UV cured floor coating. One of its claims to fame is it can last on hospital floors for 18 months. Most only last 6 months. So you have to strip and recoat them but now with our technology in it, it also can help mitigate microbes on the floors. And hospital floors, as you may imagine, are very dirty. They see everything, right? And so, we're really excited about that product. That's our second product. Our first product is a concrete sealant, and it's particularly useful on infrastructure that are exposed to the elements. Water treatment facilities, sewers. There's pathogens in our environment that are drawn to concrete. Concrete is the most prevalent man-made material on Earth. And what happens is the microbes get into the concrete, and as they grow over time, they produce sulfuric acid, and it basically erodes the concrete. So when you see, even like in my neighborhood, I did a fun little video for our social media where I was sitting on a curb and you could see how degraded one side was and where another one had been poured more recently. And that's really from water, it's from bacteria in the environments, it's from that degradation that happens sometimes over years, but sometimes more quickly, especially in sewers and things like that.
Well, and I could probably see, I mean, when you talk about concrete sealant, given the longevity of your application, I could see uses maybe in areas that are, I would say more commonly where you have exposure to germs, such as schools and other places where, having something like this will actually minimize some of the outbreaks and we have, because kids are touching stuff left and right. So interesting. So you've built teams across industries while also serving on boards. Let's talk about a little bit about leadership and impact, and I want to see if I can get Sean in here and see if he can chime in here.
Can you hear me? Excellent. Oh man, what a trip today. It's been a lot, the last 48 hours. Shari, first off, unbelievable story. I think I've about 10 years ago is when I first started to hear your name. And the one thing I love about Orlando, I came here kicking and screaming, right? It's like, oh, Orlando, it's the country. This isn't Miami. And so Roy and I both are from Miami, graduated from down there. And it's like, but I tell you, Orlando is just a little gem. And you are a huge piece of that. And, to sell Avant at the level you did just shows that a lot could be done in this town by those that are persistent. And so thank you. Bill Butcher is a really, really good friend of mine. I know he was a part of your financial team that helped you really scale that thing up. And so I know he's on the beach retired because of that. And so I've been trying to get him back in the marketplace. He's like, Sean, listen, man, I'm good. so anyway, what I get excited about, the leadership stuff, I really appreciate you sharing that. That's something that drives me. But you've raised $58 million across just different stages. What are the non-obvious skills that repeatedly helped you earn investors' trust?
Yeah, I think it's along the lines of building credibility. And when you are trying to raise money, you need to understand every aspect of your business, where you're going, what the exit looks like, and being able to show investors that you have a clear vision and then a history of execution. The first $1.5 million wasn't so easy to raise. By the time private equity came into Avant, we were $7.5 million in revenue. And so, then we had more traction. Kismet, we were fortunate on Kismet. A lot of people knew my story of being successful at Avant. And, I've heard people say this expression, but it's very true. You don't bet on the horse, you bet on the jockey. And one thing that I have learned in technology in particular is there's a lot of great technology out there. There's a lot of incredible patents. But what becomes commercialized and what gets scaled, that is a very small portion of what's out there. And so for investors, I think it's about credibility and do they think you can take it to the next level, that you have the ability to, and whether they articulate this or not, whether you are persistent and resilient and can get there at the end of the day. And that's what you want them to believe is, yes, I can do it.
That is very, very, very important. and valuable. I remember watching you all down in South Florida at the Florida Venture Forum about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, down presenting. Very impressive with Avant. Very impressed with Kismet as well. I was thinking, time is a very valuable asset that we have, and we want to protect that. How do you decide where to invest your leadership chips? From the Moors to the industry association that you're involved with, what's the big thing that drives you and helps you decide where to spend it?
Yeah, let me start with the industry association. That was something that when I was at Avant, we helped form that back in 2007. Some of our competitors and I formed that, and it was really a unique story of competitors coming together to face some really common challenges that we all were facing with state, federal, and foreign governments. And so that was really a necessity. It was a necessity, and I took the time and I loved it, and I learned how to lobby and I learned how to work with foreign governments, and there was some really great, exciting things that, I enjoyed doing. Nemours is something personal to me. I'm a pediatric nurse. My daughter had a pediatric cancer. And so, as a cancer survivor, a pediatric cancer survivor, I was thrilled to be part of an organization and currently part of an organization on their Florida Board of Managers that gives amazing care to children and to their families because I've been on the family side.
Very um, cancer. I did not know that. I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm glad to hear that she got through it and all of that. And so, but thank you for wanting to give back because that's something that we need is more people to be giving back like that. You said that it's important for female entrepreneurs to think big. How do you set the ambition inside your teams, goals, hiring, investor narratives, and things like that?
Well, I would say that one way to approach that is to plan with the end in mind. So where do we want to take this company? What employees are crucial at what points in time? If I'm talking about my own team and how I want them to think big, what are the highest impact roles? And so I think that's really important. But as I, advise other entrepreneurs, what do you want to do and how do you want to do it? I've learned a lot about the technology industry and being a tech business, and it's a little harder to think big right off the bat because creating new technology, disruptive technology, takes a lot longer than building a staffing business where you're getting revenues much sooner. Um, but I still start with the end in mind of where I want to be, creating that picture for investors and others. And that would really be my advice to female entrepreneurs and others is, where do you want to end?
Got it. I'll tell you, I had not heard the story about your daughter. And so, that's on the personal side. On the business side, let's talk about a tough chapter you've been very transparent about. In January of 25, your technical co-founder left Kismet, and you were not a technician. Uh, and so, how did you close the knowledge gap and keep momentum? Walk us through that first 60 to 90 days and what did learning the science actually look like?
Uh, that was a very challenging time, and living through many years of immigration changes and healthcare reimbursement changes that challenged me. I thought those were kind of tough times, but professionally, the learning curve of leading this technology company was a steep one. The original founder was really managing more of the technical side of the business, and I had stayed more on the business side. But there were certainly questions about how quick we were going to market. And, being an entrepreneur, having gone down this path, time is money. That is one thing that stays in my head all the time. And so, when the technical founder decided that she didn't want to just focus on the technology, and that she would rather leave the business, I was not expecting that. I was not expecting that quick decision. But I had no choice than to really learn and fill that gap. And let me tell you, learning and filling that gap was important for me as a leader to lead this business, but it was also important for me to gain the trust of the rest of the team, because the majority of our team reported up through the technical side of the business. And I also had to make workforce reductions because, the tech had not moved as fast as we had wanted it to, and we had people that were not fully occupied. So I had to make some of those tough decisions. But it basically was working 7 days a week for the first 60 to 90 days, learning the terms on the manufacturing side, on the microbiology side, on the material science, how does it work? And now I have been selling it, I've been doing the business development, but I had to be able to understand these other aspects of the business and what they mean and how they all played into getting our technology out to market as quickly as possible. And so as I learned those different areas of the business and interacted with the team and helped guide the team, and they realized, well, I could add value, right? I may not be a material science engineer, I may not be a microbiologist or an engineer, a chemist. I could still add value because I knew business and I knew what questions to ask. So it was a very challenging time. As I mentioned earlier, raising the money, it was a lot of people that had really invested in me. And so, I have a commitment to the shareholders, no matter how small, no matter how large. If you invested in this business because you believed in me, I want to keep that credibility. And so, I'm in this as much for the team as the investors, as for what I think we can do in this industry and really disrupt it.
Very impressive. Did you find yourself having to add to the expert side of the team after that departure? And another question I'd like to ask you, we're a year later after that's happened. You said that y'all are in the best technical position ever. Give us some examples of what that looks like.
So I first had to start with the workforce reduction. That was not easy. I had to figure out how to conserve capital and cash. Cash is king. And then I had to sort through the team that was here technically. And that was a big challenge for me because I'm just learning. And, in October, I brought on a CTO that actually found me, had been following Kismet for several years, has 18 years of experience in antimicrobial technologies, commercializing them. I couldn't have written a better resume if I tried. And so, however, fate, destiny, God, we found each other. And Vikram has been a great addition to the team. And we've figured out, who was really contributing and moving the needle for us and who wasn't. But it was a process. It was certainly a process.
And so tell me the part about what does the organization look like today versus a year ago?
Yeah, I would say we are still a very lean team, and but we've got products commercialized, launched. We've got more products in the pipeline. One challenge is that you don't control how quickly the manufacturers move these products within their own internal joint product development process. So we've figured out that we have to have companies of all different sizes. So when you look at the 26 companies in our pipeline, some are large multinationals, names you've heard of frequently. Others are medium to smaller companies that can move more quickly. You probably haven't heard of them, but you may know their products. So we tried to have a variety of sizes of companies. And then I think the other really big thing that we have done in the last year is we have perfected one of our mineral-based technology, and that combines the underlying mineral of the cerium oxide with chitosan, which is a natural biopolymer and an EPA minimum risk pesticide. And that's opening up all new verticals for us, as I mentioned earlier, not just coatings, but food packaging and other things like that.
Let's shake things up a bit with some rapid fire. Give us one book that you gift these days.
Well, one of my go-tos for a very long time is Five Dysfunctions of the Team. And, I have found that there's a lot of people that have been part of dysfunctional teams and they don't even realize it. So for those that do, hopefully they're coming here for a better opportunity and a better team. But I think that's like a really essential read. And then for the team to do work around integrating each new person into the team.
Give us one hiring red flag you avoid now.
So one thing I look for is humility in people. And scientists they're a new breed for me. I came from an organization where we had marketing, we had salespeople, we had business people, we had process people, project managers. So really understanding the scientist has been a work in process for me. But what I really think is important is that everyone has humility and appreciates that they don't have all the answers, because science in many times is as much art as science. And from where I sit, I see a constant evolution of that science.
Excellent. Give us an underrated KPI.
An underrated KPI, as I look at a technology business looking at commercialization, it's the development timeline, right? You line up all these great partners. We're working with some of the largest companies in the world in their segments. And, the KPI of development timeline within their organization is far different than somebody else's. So you really have to drill into this in those early conversations and make sure there's alignment.
Now, I heard you say Low Country is a spot of yours. You're building a house up there, or you may have a house up there. Give us a favorite spot outside of the country.
Um, well, we have really enjoyed, like I said, the Low Country in South Carolina, but a newfound spot that we just love is Jackson Hole, Wyoming. My husband and I fly fish together in addition to other types of fishing, but that is, and if you haven't ever been to Yellowstone, I mean, how spectacular. You just are in awe at the ecosystem there. So that's really been a favorite place for us to go and explore and fish.
Awesome, Sean. So, Shari, thanks for that amazing journey back through Kismet and et cetera. And going through Avant and now Kismet, what would you say, reflecting back and sort of looking in the rearview mirror, is your leadership philosophy now versus the early years at Avant?
That's a great question. And, as I kind of think about where my leadership philosophy has gone over the years, I think, I'm a lot better at understanding how people work. Whether you look at their Myers-Briggs or their social styles, everyone's different. And so as a leader now, if I can understand more about that person's social style or personality type, I'm a driver. I get right to business. But if I need to start a meeting by saying, how have you been? How are your kids? How's this? How's that? And then that's what I need to do. And so for me as a leader, I think I'm much better at flexing to people's styles, adapting to their personality types with the end goal of creating a stronger team and getting better results.
Nice. So let me ask you the flip side of that coin is what won't you compromise or flex on today?
Yeah. Integrity. Yeah, I think it is so important to be an organization of integrity. And, there was, when I first started down this journey at Avant of, going through this EOS, we use scaling up methodology and, really defining your core values. Is your core values need to be so ingrained in the organization that you're willing to hire and fire for them, both clients and employees. And to me, working with people that have integrity is just so important, and you really can't compromise on that.
Very well said. Very well
That's
said.
right. That's right. That's right. You run at a serious pace. Any rituals or relationships that helps you stay grounded, reset perspectives and things like that?
Well, it's funny that you asked that because we were talking about my dedication to exercising. So I'm going on a yoga retreat at the end of the month. My sister is finally going with me. And, you just have to take care of yourself, however that is, so that you can take care of other people.
I love that. I work out, and I have been saying that what you just said. I work out the way I work out to take care of other people. Very, very cool. I have a question for you. Where were you born and raised?
Well, I was born in Wisconsin, but my parents moved to Boca Raton, Florida before I was a year old. So I really, like you guys, I grew up in South Florida, even spent a little time in Miami, more in North. I had that territory when I went into hospice. Um, but yeah, that's where I grew up, and I still go down there quite a bit. My father was a pastor at a church in Boca, and then my brother-in-law was there. And three of my brothers, my sister, their families, and my mom all live within about 5 miles of that church. So I find myself down there celebrating our next gen of great nieces and nephews that are coming along now.
Cool. With one last thing, and we'll get back to the questions. Which church?
Oh, Advent Lutheran Church.
Okay, very cool. Spent a bunch of time in the West Palm Beach area, so love Palm Beach. I'm trying to get down there permanently. So anyway, let's get back to top three truths you wish every founder internalized right now.
Well, number one is lifelong learning. I think, and that kind of goes hand in hand with number two, which is humility. When you think you know everything, you've given up on being a lifelong learner. So I think that's really important, is that you are constantly developing your leadership skills, and whether it's your new industry and learning about that, but lifelong learning, humility, and then I would say persistence. It's hard to keep up the level of persistence that you need, especially in a startup. And maybe that goes hand in hand, the persistence, the resilience. But I would say that those are some of the most important things that founders need to internalize, with, again, lifelong learning being number one.
So, Shari, you talked about, I call it always be learning, right? And I'm a creature of that in the sense that, if you're not continuing to invest in yourself so that you learn what's out there, then, you're pretty much just a bystander in the road because someone else will pass you by. The humility part, of course, and also persistence there. So, three very important points. And thank you for sharing that with us. Let me ask you, for those of our audience who are, listening out there and want to, let's say, start to prepare their journey and the path that you've taken, where should they start?
Again, I think it's kind of interesting, right? Regulatory shifts and how do they happen and why do they happen? Um, I think in this country, there's certainly a political side to that, which coming from an immigration dependent business, I saw many times. But I think, as we look to sustainability, and where do you fall on that, in my industry, metals can be toxic. And, really looking at what are the trends around a greener, more sustainable product. And, I think that when people are starting out, they need to really spend some time understanding the industry that they're in, the consumer, whether that is an individual or a business. What do they want? And then what are those tailwinds, as I talk about them, the regulatory tailwinds, the political tailwinds, things like that. Maybe they're headwinds, but it depends. Are they going for you or against you? But that is something that I would say is a good place to start for people.
Excellent. Excellent. So 10 years, you've scaled up Kismet. What impact would you have liked to see have been made over those 10 years?
Well, I think it fundamentally goes to that sustainability and green technology. I'd like to see a healthier world. When you get into this hard tech, material technology world and you start to think about what we're exposed to every day, having a technology like ours that I truly believe will disrupt a $10 billion antimicrobial additive market. I'd love to see in 10 years that greener technologies that are safer but still keep us healthy. That's what I would like to see. And hopefully that's something that we're paving the way for today and 10 years from now will be known for.
Awesome. So I got to ask you here, and I usually ask all our guests this, Shari. And, if you had the ability to go back and create, or go today, I would say create a dream board of advisors that spawns any era of time, who would you choose to be on that dream board and why?
Well, that is a great question. And I am glad that you guys provided me a preview of some of these questions. So I could think about it because that would be a hard one. I think that I would name the following people in no particular order. I really have been impressed with Sarah Blakely's story as an entrepreneur for Spanx. I think, that she invented a new apparel category, and it's kind of like we are, we're trying to define a new antimicrobial additive category. And so I think she has a great story. She has a great story of, not being funded with outside money and building $1 billion business. That's pretty impressive. I think as I think about politics and how it's influenced my life, one of the presidents, not to be political, but just in terms of leadership, I think about Ronald Reagan. And I think about somebody that is, driven by ideology and has a level of humility. It was never about Ronald Reagan in his mind. And I think that's unique. I think it's unique for many leaders. I think it's far more unique for politicians, but we'll leave it at that. um, I'll leave both sides of the aisle. I would give everybody the equal on
Agreed
that one.
100%.
Yeah. I'll name two more people. I think Jeff Bezos, because he really was also creating something new and differentiated, but focused on customer experience and operational efficiencies. And then Tim Cook. What I like about Tim Cook is he came into an organization and he really has a very soft voice. That's what I've read about him. He's a value-driven leader. And, I think you can do that with, again, maybe it's humility. I've only know what I've read of him. But I think he comes in with a much softer touch than many leaders, but he has still created and continued a unbelievable growth trajectory at Apple.
Oh, that's really amazing board. From the innovator to the diplomat to the I would say the visionary, and then the Tim Cook coming in and being able to step into shoes and keep the ship running in the right direction, but also add his own flavor. I think I would venture to say I would say that you have. You have a remarkable story, but I can't wait 10 years from now for us to come back on this podcast with your new board that you just put together there and see where you've gone.
Yeah, I just my thing is I can't believe she picked an FSU grad to be on her board. I'm not sure.
I'm married to an FSU grad,
Oh, okay,
and I
got
have
it.
a daughter that's an FSU grad. So this Gator is open-minded.
I heard you talking about Ronald, and you were like, hey, well, I can go on both sides of the aisle. And I'll tell you, when I was at the University of Miami, I read the autobiography of Ronald Reagan, very impactful, and helped me. At the same time, I was reading the Malcolm X autobiography and the Thurgood Marshall autobiography, and they all played a very, very serious role in the way I see life. Anyway, Shari, unbelievable. Thank you for your time. Sorry that we've had, some of these technology boogaboos. Like for an incredible woman like yourself and a human being more than that. And as I stated, here in Orlando, you built the business that you built, which was very, very impressive. And so I too can't wait to see what Kismet looks like. And like I said, I got to hear the pitch down in Miami a couple of years ago. But thank you for the journey and for sharing your journey. And I look forward to, like Roy just mentioned, I look forward to seeing what it looks like in 10 years.
Well, it's great spending time with both of you. I've enjoyed the opportunity, and thank you for sharing this time with me. And I look forward to coming back in 10 years.
Well, we'll probably have you back way before then. And, Shari, sincerely, thank you for spending this time with us. Like Sean said, your journey from building one of the nation's leading healthcare staffing companies to stepping boldly into deep tech innovation, even when you had to learn the technology on your own, is both inspiring and incredibly grounding for anyone leading through uncertainty. The way you navigated challenges, invest in people, keep pushing for safer, smarter solutions speaks volumes about the kind of leader you are. We're grateful for your openness, your wisdom, and the example you continue to set for founders everywhere. Thank you for joining us on the Dynamic Business Leaders podcast, and can't wait to follow your journey of success and to see this take off even bigger than it already is.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe this episode. And until next time, stay curious, stay driven, and keep leading with purpose.
Hi, I'm Roy Richardson, host of the Dynamic Business Leaders podcast. Are you a business owner or a leader of a successful business? If yes, we'd love to have you as a guest on our program. Our goal is simple. We provide a platform for leaders to share their experiences to benefit others. We want to hear your story, how you got started, the challenges you faced along the way, and your passion today. If this sounds like you or you know someone who fits these criteria, then be sure to get in touch with us by visiting our website linked in the episode description below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the notification bell to be notified when our next episode goes live. Or, if you'd rather listen to us during your car rides, you can also follow us on your favorite audio channel using your podcatcher. Thanks again, and remember, keep crushing it.